This episode is brought to you in part by DatsonParts.com. That's Datsun Parts with a Z.com. If you're looking for any Datsun related parts, please check and compare prices on DatsonParts.com first. Alright, so we've got the front engine bay pretty much down to bare metal. It's ready to scuff, degrease, wax and grease remove, tack cloth, and ready to throw on the epoxy primer. However, we have two problem areas that we need to address before we do all that, so we're going to go ahead and get diving into removing the rusted area of the battery tray out and then seeing how bad that firewall is. Alright, battery tray's out. As suspected, firewall needs some work, so let's go ahead and start cutting that out. Alright, we've gone ahead and mixed up some two-part epoxy primer. We're waiting for it to induce, and then we're going to go ahead and spray 2 coats on the brand new firewall panel piece that we made back behind me, right there. We've done a wax and grease removed, all that good stuff. It's clean, it's bare metal, it's ready to be painted. We want to go ahead and paint it now while we have it out, and I know that seems weird, paint something before you weld it in and burn off all the paint on the edges where you're welding, but there's a spot that butts up to the back of the frame rail on the passenger side that's not going to be accessible once we install this panel. So we want to go ahead and get some corrosion protection on it while we can. While that's open, the passenger side frame rail is going to get a whole bunch of epoxy primer sprayed into that as far as we can get it up there as well, just to give a little bit of extra corrosion protection. Again, while we're in there, we might as well. And while we're at it, before we put the paint on the inside of the frame rail, we have some rusted through holes that need to be repaired. One of the tips that I've learned over the years, and one of the most frustrating parts of welding rust through holes, is the blowout. Any little bit of heat on that thin metal just makes the hole blow out, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it just becomes more of a glob and more of a mess and a bigger hassle to actually fix. One of the best tips that I've learned is using a welding spoon. Now, you can go buy that tool if you want to, but if you're cheap like me, just use a regular piece of copper pipe. That's all it is. So I've flattened one end out on a copper pipe and I clean it up every now and then. If you put that on, if you can access the back side of the hole and you put that copper spoon on or that copper pipe when you're welding, it gives a little bit more area or something for that heat to dissipate into that's not on that thin edge of the metal that you're trying to weld. Plus, the MIG wire doesn't stick to the copper pipe, so it's very useful. Put that in your tool bag, save it for a rainy day. Let's get busy. That is not bad for a little Harbor Freight detail gun. That gun comes in the little $50 kit with the full-size HVLP and that little mini 4-ounce detail gun. I hate using that gun. The gun sucks. And once you use something like the Techno Pro Light or the DeVilbiss Pro Light, GTI Pro Light, once you paint with something good, you never really want to use something that terrible again. Unfortunately, we only needed a couple ounces. I think I mixed up 4 ounces for that whole panel and a ton of paint that went in the passenger side frame rail. That's more than enough. I think I probably could have mixed up 3 ounces and been fine. But we're going to let this dry overnight, and then we're going to come back and weld it all in tomorrow. So now's a good stopping point. I will see you guys in the morning. Good morning, it is the next day and we are getting ready to weld in our Firewall patch panel. We've got it in the oven right now at about 110 degrees just to help speed up the curing process for that primer. The fingernail test, it didn't really pass, so before I throw a bunch more heat in it, welding, and then blister all the edges, which may happen anyway, I'm going to try to go ahead and avoid that if possible. So once that's out of the oven, we're going to let it cool down to room temperature, and then we're going to go ahead and get it all welded in. All right, we're underneath the passenger side frame rail and fender side of everything. And if you saw me cut this out, I cut out along here, down this section, and then across this way. There's a lot of companies out there who make replacement battery tray panels. The problem with those is there's one bend, and that's right here It comes up flat from here, bends at 90 degrees at a radius bend, and then comes over here and meets this. They don't fit very well. I've replaced them like that before. I've made my own panels like that before, and the fitment was just never to my liking or satisfaction. So this one we're going to try a little bit different. We've got one bend down this way that we've already made up. And that's this piece here. We bent this in one piece, and we're doing two separate pieces for this flange. Because in this corner, there's a flange that goes around here. That's going to be hard to make. So once we get all this firewall back in place, this one's going to pop up just like that. And then we're going to build another piece to come up and meet up to it and tie all this in together. Hopefully it goes as planned. If not, I'll just edit this out and you'll never see any of it. So if it does go to plan, you'll see a nice, beautiful new metal battery tray. All right, so we've got the firewall patch panel welded in place. We still got to grind down all the welds, and then we got to fit our curved battery tray piece, the first piece that we made, before we can make up our second curved piece. So we have a couple things we got to work out. One, just this little setup right here back behind me is just a level across. Well, I've actually got it off of the rotisserie and on the lift right now, so everything is level. We're checking to make sure that the frame rails are parallel and perfectly level. And then what we're going to do here is, if you notice on this side, that there's just like the pitch of a roof, everything is sloped inward a little bit, and that's designed to help the water run off away from a point to where it would collect and create rust. Imagine that. So on this side, if we just put the panel up that we made perfectly level, not only are we going to create somewhere that water can form and collect, it will be a potential rust spot in the future, which is the whole reason that we're trying to fix everything on it right now, is to prevent that. So we're going to try to symmetrically put that panel at the same angle that this panel is at. That way it looks less like a patch and more like the original metal that was there. The other thing we got to work out is, once this thing is level to whatever angle it's going to be, we know it's going to be angled in slightly, not that this is just kind of exaggerating, but this little corner up here, once we get everything kind of butt up to where it should be, we're going to angle it, and as you see, that gap over here closes. So we're going to have a little bit of section that we need to trim out, and you can see where I've marked right there to kind of start cutting. Basically all you do is you'll measure this gap back to where it kind of starts getting everything a little closed in and more parallel. And then you're going to cut on this panel from here up to here, this distance. So as you can see, with the angle that this sheet moves at, it actually varies the gap over here. So we're going to set this angle first, and then we're going to start grinding from here all the way up to here. That way this whole thing shifts, closes this gap. Instead of trying to add metal over here to meet this, we're just going to trim this up and then move everything over. That'll give us the proper distance and everything to start making our second curved panel, and that'll be a lot easier to tie into here. We're going to have one little section up here that we're going to have to just hammer and dolly out, and then the rest of this should be fairly parallel and a lot easier to fabricate. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and set that angle and then mark where we need to start grinding the areas off. That way we can slide that panel up to meet the original metal. And then we're going to go ahead and start tacking that thing in place and getting ready to form our second panel. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to bring this portion of this project to a close. I hope you had as much fun watching it as I did doing it. If you haven't done so already, please click that like button if you enjoyed the content. If you want to know what we're doing next on this thing, you already know what to do. Hit that subscribe button, turn on your bell notifications, that way you get notified just as soon as we post another video. We appreciate you as always, and until next time, thank you so very much for watching this video.